IT happened. Elon Musk finally reveals artificial gravity Starship 2021. In his latest batch of tweets, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk says that the company is already thinking about the many potential ways its next-generation Starship launch vehicle could be used in space. Already, ideas publicly touted by the SpaceX CEOs range from using cargo starships to clean up space debris with its mouth-like payload bay to a stripped-down, expendable variant of the rocket to rapidly send massive spacecraft throughout the solar system. Now, Musk says that SpaceX has also considered tethering starships together in space to create a form of artificial gravity for passengers on multi-month journeys between planets, as well as the possibility of turning entire starships into all-in-one orbital observatories a magnitude more powerful than Hubble. So don't forget to watch today's video to the very end to learn more about Elon Musk finally revealing the artificial gravity Starship. Embracing the Starship, apparently invoked during discussions with astrophysicist and Nobel laureate Saul Perlmutter. At least parts of the physics community are already considering the possibilities offered by using Starship as a sort of foundation or spacecraft bus that could carry and operate vast scientific payloads. While Starship has already been officially floated several times as a serious contender for launch services for major future missions, this concept would instead see Starship function as the spacecraft itself. As of 2021, Starship has yet to reach space or orbit once, but SpaceX isn't far from that milestone. Eventually, perhaps just a few years from now, Starship will have successfully launched to and operated in orbit dozens or even hundreds of times and become a mature and reliable spacecraft. At that point, it wouldn't be out of the question to entrust starships themselves to serve as long-lasting scientific spacecraft, exploiting a bus that could offer abundant power, propulsion, thermal management, navigation, and communications capabilities to any hosted payloads. That includes extensively modifying starships on the ground to create vast space observatories, among numerous other possibilities. Given Starship's low production cost, 9-meter, 30 feet, diameter and nominal ability to deliver at least 100 metric tons, 220,000 pounds, of payload to low Earth orbit, LEO, it's not inconceivable that ships could be outfitted with massive telescopes and scientific instruments. Perhaps more importantly, drastically reduced payload constraints, more than an order of magnitude relative to the Hubble or James Webb telescopes, could allow major innovation in spacecraft/instrument design, radically lowering costs while still improving reliability, redundancy, and performance. The question of artificial gravity. Meanwhile, Musk says that SpaceX has also considered tethering crewed starships together and spinning them around the center of that tether to create artificial gravity for crew members on months-long journeys between Earth, Mars, and other planets. Among fan communities, the tethered gravity concept has been circulating ever since SpaceX first announced Starship in 2016. Loosely researched by NASA and other institutions for decades, no real experimental efforts, save for a single halting test during a 1960s Gemini mission, have ever been pursued. For Starship, orbital refueling could easily allow SpaceX to cut crewed Earth-Mars transit time to 100 days or less, subjecting astronauts to significantly less time in microgravity than those that crew the International Space Station, ISS. The value proposition of artificial gravity on 3-month cruises is likely substantially less clear-cut, given the far-reaching complexity and modifications required to make such a system functional and make starships compatible. Regardless, Musk rather cryptically says that SpaceX has considered the concept, though he didn't elaborate on whether the company ultimately decided to drop the subject or pursue it further. Inspired by science fiction. Despite the many problems we face in the world today, it is still an exciting time to be alive. As we speak, mission planners and engineers are developing the concepts that will soon take astronauts on voyages beyond low Earth orbit (LEO). For the first time in almost 50 years, in addition to returning to the Moon, we are also looking further afield to Mars and other distant places in the solar system. This presents a number of challenges, not the least of which are the effects of prolonged exposure to radiation and microgravity. And whereas there are many viable options for protecting crews from radiation, gravity remains a bit of a stumbling block. To address this, Uber Small Stars has proposed a concept that he calls the Gravity Link Starship, GLS, a variation of SpaceX's Starship that will be able to provide its own artificial gravity. The idea was inspired in part by science fiction. Depending on how realistic a franchise is trying to be, Starships will either generate their own gravity using some special device or through rotating sections. While the former concept is much like the hyperdrive, i.e. uses physics that are either totally fictitious or theoretical at this point, the latter is something that is entirely feasible. Studying the concept. The concept goes back to over a century, with the first recorded example provided by Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, 1857 to 1935, one of the founding fathers of rocketry and aeronautics. In 1903, he published a study titled Investigation of Outer Space Rocket Devices, where he suggested using rotational force to create artificial gravity in space. Since then, many variations of this idea have been proposed for space stations and habitats, such as the von Braun wheel, the O'Neill cylinder, and the Stanford torus. Some concepts are even being considered for development, such as NASA's Nautilus X space station, which would use a rotating torus to provide artificial gravity, or the Gateway Foundation's proposal for a commercial space station. After conducting some research into centrifugal force, Small Stars arrived at the idea for the GLS, as he explains in his video, shown above. The GLS is basically a hub ship, i.e. like the hub of a wheel, where the payload bay is filled with a truss that unfold and deploy robotically, thus serving as the wheel spokes. It would be positioned between two passenger starships and would link up with them during the 6+ month-long journey to Mars. Once linked up, the passenger ships would swivel around to reorient themselves and fire their thrusters to impart momentum to the wheel. Once enough velocity was generated to simulate Earth normal gravity, 9.8 meters squared or 1 g, the passenger ships would reorient themselves again to face inward towards the hub ship. For the remainder of the journey, those aboard the passenger ships would experience the sensation of being pulled down thanks to the centrifugal force created by the rotation of the wheel. As Small Stars outlines the system, the gravity-linked Starship concept provides a spin gravity that reuses the main engines, taps leftover fuel, and avoids impractical space construction in spacewalks. The GLS is basically a hub ship, like the hub of a wheel. Instead of humans in cargo, the payload bay of the GLS is filled with truss that can robotically fold out and lock into place, serving as the wheel spokes. Exposure to microgravity. Currently, a great deal is known about the long-term effects of exposure to microgravity, thanks in large part to research conducted by astronauts aboard the International Space Station, ISS. These include muscle loss, bone density loss, diminished organ function, eyesight, changes in cardiovascular strength, and even genetic changes. These are things that astronaut Scott Kelly can certainly attest to. After spending a year in space as part of NASA's twin study, he found readjusting to life on Earth to be agonizing, as detailed in his book Endurance. In order to prevent such health effects before crews even reach deep space destinations like the Moon or Mars, where the long-term effects of low G are still not known, mitigation strategies will be needed. In addition to detailing the system, Small Stars also performed the necessary calculations to determine the structure of the truss and the necessary velocity to simulate Earth normal gravity. Using Spin Calculator, he determined that a rotational velocity of 31 meters per second would work for a system that measured about 100 meters, 97.99 meters to be exact, or 321.5 feet, in radius, providing the feeling of 1 g and making roughly 3 rotations per minute. The proposal. Currently, Small Stars is on the second iteration of this proposal, which included updated calculations on the rotation, a new truss shape, and the introduction of cables to reinforce the tensile strength of the truss. He plans to release a third version in the near future that will feature calculations about the loads and an animation of the deployment and function of the truss. Those who are interested are encouraged to subscribe to his YouTube channel for updates. In the meantime, it remains to be seen if SpaceX will be interested in this concept. Who knows? Maybe Musk and his people have their own ideas in the works, and we'll be able to do a little compare and contrast soon. With that, we come to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Lastly, join in a next time for more of such interesting content.